guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Tulis.
The left wing of the Christian church yesterday spoke out in volumes against a proposed ban by Mayor Andy Burke and his chief of police, David Roddy, a ban on panhandling, a ban on begging alms in the streets, along the sidewalks and boulevards and restaurant parking lots of Chattanooga. And the vote of the public, if we can judge by the crowd that assembled around the microphone before City Council last night, the vote of the public is 100% against Mayor Burke's proposal to ban panhandling, to extend current prohibition against panhandling from the tourist areas of town, not all of them, but some of the more important ones, such as IMAX and the aquarium, to the whole city, giving police, giving the armored and armed and uniformed paramilitary organized force of the police department more arrest, citation, and jailing authority. This proposal that was made last Tuesday, 8 days ago, by David Roddy, Chief Roddy, before the council, seems to be a trial balloon, and the prick and pop of it was pricked. Don't know if the balloon has popped, but the balloon was certainly jabbed by multiple incisions, multiple needles, if you will, of those who took the microphone yesterday at City Council. And if the idea survives at all, it will be because behind the blank gazes of the City Council members, there was a scurrying about. How can we justify going along with this plan? And I don't think in the mind of probably one of those council members that idea survived at all, that we can bring more order to Chattanooga. We can enhance the livability of Chattanooga downtown by increasing police activity and police enforcement. Well, this is David Tulis, and the main story today is that, but it's the main one. It's not a sidebar, but it's probably the main one on the page, but it's beneath the fold, because above the fold on the yournews.com platform is the walkout today among students, hundreds of students in the Chattanooga area, in North Georgia and points beyond Hamilton County, will be participating in a walkout that protests the use of guns to kill people, the use of semi-automatic magazine-fed rifles such as AR-15s and other high-capacity firearms to kill people. That is why guns exist. Their sole purpose is to kill. There is no purpose other than that. A gun has no duty, no claim on reality, except at the point of extinguishing animal or human life. Now, some people may shoot a rifle at a tree to chop it down, but that is just in fun when young men have too much time on their hands, too much money for ammo, and are going to chop down a tree with a rifle. That has been done. But ordinarily, firearms are used to extinguish animal or human life, and there is no other purpose for them than that. That is why they exist. And these students, by the hundreds across the fabled so-called Tennessee Valley, will be marshaling themselves today to protest gun violence, to protest the killing of innocent people by men who are customers of the psychotropic drug industry very often, and those who are customers, clients of the psychiatric and psychological professions, or maybe who need to be, and people who generally are outside the scope, outside the influence of Christendom. They are the gunmen that mow down, most recently, 17 students and others, staff people, in Parkland, Florida. Now, the protest has something that is very typical of a schooled people. We are a schooled people. We are not a free people. And what I notice in trying to get caught up on this story is this: that there is protest, but there is a very maternal hand upon all these students. There is continuing involvement by administration. And if you have a protest, my thinking is that it should be violative of norms. It should step outside of all the routines in the school. So a school by design, it is meant for people to all do the same thing, right? That's what schooling is. It comes from biology. Fish go together in schools. Families, whole tribes from the Finny tribe are together in the water. So they go left at the same time. They go up. They go down. They go towards clouds of plankton, all together in the same velocity, in the same direction, and they're all alike. And so schooling is the same idea. If you go to school, you're supposed to think in a certain way. You go every day to be enculturated with the civic ethic of your people and your time. And that's what the schooling is. It is a religious program, of course. It teaches children and young people and adults, right? There are many adults in schools today. It teaches them how to think, how to behave, if you will. Behavior, of course, another word from the realm of biology and behaviorism. Behavior is the academicians such as Thorndike back in the early part of the 20th century and others. Behaviorism is used to make people think alike. So here now we have a protest in a school, and there is dissent. Okay, there's dissent within the school body, and there is a dissent among the adults and the children who are the school system against what these people view as inaction by the federal Congress. And what they want is that Congress take action against the Second Amendment through a back door, and that back door is the mental health angle. That gun violence is a public health crisis and should be dealt with as a form of mental illness. And of course, President Trump is sympathetic to that argument. In fact, he's sympathetic even to having people have their guns seized from them by the officer, apart from due process. Seize the guns first and due process later, he said semi-famously a couple days ago. So he is not very careful about the so-called niceties of law and the niceties of rights that prevent the officers from doing that, right? There has to be due process. And if in the end, if you don't have due process, if you don't have rights that are secured in law, a law known by all, right, and obeyed by all, the officer, the individual, and every agent, then you do have a tyranny. And I think Americans, they love their tyrannies. And I think the whole story that I'm reading about at TV9, for example, has two good stories on this, one out of Whitfield County and one that discusses schools in the Tennessee Valley, and also the Chattanooga Time-Free Press has a good story this morning as well by Megan Mangrum. She's the journalist who covers this story today. And again, the question is seizing weapons, and can we all unite in protest to get Congress to do something, outside the Constitution. And these students would say, well, we don't want Congress to do anything unconstitutional. They would shrink from the idea, or shrink from the accusation that is what they want. But that is what would happen. And the groups that are organizing these protests say, for example, according to TV9's report, quoting one website, we demand that Congress enact an immediate resolution declaring gun violence a public health crisis. Of course, the resolution has no teeth legally, and it's interesting to note that many statutes that are on the books in the U.S. Code came out of Congress as resolutions, and so we have mere opinion and mere sentiment written up as enforceable statute over on the other side in the USC. Then from which there flow, of course, regulations published ahead of time in the code of in the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations. And so anyway, we want there to be just an opinion, a kind of opinionated ejaculation by Congress as to gun violence being a public health crisis, and dedicating federal funding to research solutions and implement violence intervention programs. Well, we have a postmodern and a postmodern society, and so school massacres are part of the landscape that public education has created. I mean, it has created that. We demand Congress recognize all forms of gun violence. And here now in this one statement, perhaps the most valuable of all, including violence committed by police. Now, here, when you have this police violence brought in, suddenly the story doesn't stay quite as fixed in place as you'd wanted it to be, because we have with police violence last year there were about 1,200 people slain by cops. You have a sudden new idea of what gun violence is and who has a monopoly. You see, we have a monopoly, effective monopoly on the right to bear arms, and that is to say the cops and the sheriff's departments and the federal agencies and the state agencies, of which there are myriad of them, all have their semi-private, semi-corporate armies enforcing, protecting plants and so on. And we know this is a severe problem because we have in the Chattanooga area, which only we have reported here at Nooga Radio 92.7, we have a coal utility making traffic arrests by armed officers, and we have that here at Nooga Radio. It was something that occurred in July, and we have TVA making traffic arrests of people who crossed over Thrasher Bridge. And so we have we found out in pursuing that story that the Tennessee Valley Authority has arrest powers anywhere in the state, granted to it by an obsequious General Assembly many decades ago. And so we have these armies of officers swarming across the land, and as the founders thought in their time, eating out our substance. We would say, well, they're not eating out our substance. They're protecting us. They are providing us security. Well, this is David Tulis, and I do thank you for giving me just a couple minutes every time. That is the main story, and we're wanting to make note of something. And here, let me just say that kind of off. There's no script on this show, and certainly if you call me, there's no script in that either. The number is 800-8949, 800-8949, and you can certainly call me. But what I think is really interesting about this story is how cowed and timid Americans have become. We are the most timid people, and here's how we become that way. We become that way because of the good and fine public service of people such as Judy Gilreath. She appears in a story of News Channel 9 WTVC, and she initially, the story said, decided to let Whitfield County students participate in the walkout to honor this Stoneman Douglas High School students who lost their lives to a fellow student with his weapon. Gilreath says students do have rights under the First Amendment to our Constitution to express their views. Again, this is a very patronizing copy by the writer of this story, which goes on to say, but they do not have the right to express those views whenever and however they wish, and they have no right to walk out of class during the school day without consequences. So notice what we have here is we have an administrative threat against a constitutional right. Okay, if you have a constitutional right, then what's an administrative threat to you? If you intend as a student, you are an adult, right? If you're past 14, you can make love to a member of the opposite sex and create a child. Okay, you are in fact a man. And it's interesting how we have adults. There are thousands of adults in public school in Hamilton County. There are thousands of adults in public school in Whitfield County, Ray County, Bradley County, in all the counties across the country, millions of adults who are in public school. They're 15, 16, 17, 18 years old. And here we're told by official, as if it were a real threat, that we'll have a consequence. If you walk out of school, you're going to be written up. And so what we see here is an effort by administration to make it seem that it's really dangerous. It's really risky. We are risking a lot to express ourselves. And what's more, the students aren't just walking out and doing what the heck they want to. They're going to do it in an orderly fashion, and they're going to have protests even within the school itself. You have your protests in the auditorium. This is David Tulis. Caller, you're live on the air. What's on your mind?
Calls will not be answered.
What's on your mind, caller? Just try me again. This is David Tulis, and the story tells more about this about Heritage High School in North Georgia. This is David Tulis. You're all live on the air with me. What's on your mind?
David, I totally disagree with you. You
Go
have
ahead,
no
Mike.
rights until you're 18 years old. You've got privileges from your parents or the government if you're not emancipated. So that doesn't wash. Number two, this is a political movement against guns.
Of course it is.
There's a reason why kids can't join the military or sign contracts till they're 18. Their brains are not properly formed. So let's have them walk out when there's not pudding for dessert on the menu. This is a political movement. It's a left-wing movement. It's a reactionary movement. Kids get things taken away from them when they're bad. And kids think in terms of, oh, the gun is bad, let's take it away. They do not have any constitutional rights. And if they did, they would be upholding the right to bear arms under the Second Amendment. This is a political ploy by the leftist Marxists that, as they usually do, are using kids to get their will, to get their agenda passed through. This is not a matter of the First Amendment. Kids don't have rights, period.
Well, this school administrator in Litchfield County thinks that they do, Mike.
Well, he's wrong. He's wrong. They don't. Kids don't have rights. They're under the parents' jurisdiction until they're 18. You'll do what I tell you to do in my household. Now, can you hit them? Can you abuse? No. That doesn't mean they have rights. That means if you abuse a kid, you're just violating a law, a common law or a statutory law. But they have no individual rights. None. Not until they're 18. Once they're 18 or emancipated, if the judge emancipates them at 14, then they have constitutional rights. I mean, that's the law. I didn't make this up. It's the law.
Okay, listen. Thanks, Mike. You're making a good point that these adults in these schools don't have full rights. They don't have the right to vote. For example, they are not allowed to consume alcohol until 20 or 21 years old. I understand that, but what I'm getting at is something really beyond that. I'm looking here at the sociology of schooling to make these people submissive, because there are always these administrators around to help them have their protest, to make sure it's safe. They are being made timid. The whole administration. In fact, the way this story is being covered suggests how deep this program is in public education. The Hamilton County School District had some recommendations for this walkout today, and the principals were told, for example, according to TV9's report, consider working with your student leadership groups to organize and plan for students who desire to take part. Make sure your faculty is informed and that you are prepared with adequate staff to oversee the time. You know, if you're really upset about something, why do you have to tell administration what you're doing? If you're really upset about something and you're 17 years old and you're a man, or you're a grown woman and you're still in this factory school, why do you have to tell anybody what your plans are? Why don't you just go and do what you want to do? And if you get reprimanded, if you get written up, if there's a blot on your record because you took part in an expression of your perspective, even though it may be wrong, okay, you may be arguing the wrong thing, but what I'm saying here, it doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong legally or constitutionally. That's beside the point. But if you are a self-respecting man, why do you want to have a planned protest? Why do you want to get permission to have a protest? If you're a protester and you're exercising a First Amendment right, why do you have to go to a free speech zone? That's my question. Why do these students, many of whom are adults, they can have children. They're old enough to make love and have children. They're old enough to keep their own households, to hold jobs, to provide for families. They have a history in America of children supporting families, children working, bringing home money to support parents and aged relatives who live with the family. But no, we are not to be free. We are not to be bold. We are to have administrators everywhere looking out for us, making sure that we're secure, that we are safe. The Hamilton County School Advisory says communicate with students and faculty after plans are in place. Encourage students to hold the walkout indoors. So some students are going to be so fearful of offending anybody or walking on somebody's toes or not following the rules of the school factory that they are going to go to the gym. They will have their protest in a cafeteria, in an auditorium. Should it not be that if you really have something to say, whether you're on the left or on the right, wherever you are, that you should not be brought into submission to administration? There is a book. I have given it a copy of it to a son of mine, and it is about the rise of administrative law and the administrative state. Steve Bannon made a quote early on in his time in the White House about deconstructing the administrative state. Well, that's a great quote. And even though he is on the right and is in the end a progressive and a socialist like many others, it's a great quote because that is our problem. Our problem is we live under administration. We are not a free people and expressive people. And if you're in public school, if you're at GPS, where much of the labor has come for this protest today here in Chattanooga, you're doing it even within consultation with administrators. Well, if you have something to say, just go ahead and do it. Why worry about administration? Why worried about being written up? If it matters, go ahead and speak out, have your say, make people run, make them run.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, digital FM 95.3 HD4 and 92.7 FM.